All innovations begin with a challenge, and our challenge had a name. She was named Cheryl. From the day Cheryl entered my classroom, you could tell that she had a difficult life. Her musty clothes and unfiltered language really betrayed the hard life that she was living. Since it was a writing class, over the next few weeks, she began writing paragraphs, and each paragraph told me more about Cheryl. She was a single mother. She suffered from food insecurity, and she then wrote about all the challenges that keep people from having a secure life. This was in direct contrast with my life because I had graduated first in my class from a private liberal arts college. Learning came rather easily to me. I sat at the feet of scholars who had sat at the feet of scholars who had sat at the feet of scholars. It was a tradition that dated back generations, hundreds of years, where scholars spun out these golden threads of knowledge and framed those within the tradition and rigor that was the medium of the classroom. It was my experience that students arrived at the sacred time into the classroom, the sacred space, to glean the sacred knowledge. It was a bit of a survival of the fittest format, so that those who were unfit fell by the wayside. And that brings me back to Cheryl. Around midterm, Cheryl called me to tell me that her house had burned and that she and her daughter Katrina were looking for a place to live and that she would come back to class, but she didn't know when. Betraying all my personal expectations, Cheryl did return to class, and she finished the class earning a C. Cheryl and I were both proud because she had made a C. I was proud of myself and secretly gave myself a golden star on my chart because I had survived Cheryl. A week later, Cheryl arrived at my door with a gift. It was her textbook, and it smelled like smoke. It was smoke damaged and waterlogged. And when she gave me her textbook, she wanted for me to give that to another student who couldn't afford a textbook. Here was a human being who did not even have the basic securities of life, who taught me a lesson in altruism. It flipped Maslow's hierarchy on its head, and it flipped me, really changed the way I thought. I was ashamed of myself because I knew that even though I had saved this one Cheryl, hundreds of Cheryls and their daughters had fallen by the wayside because of the way I taught. I had been propagating the medium, the time and space and rigors of the classroom, and allowing that to take precedent over the message, which was the learning experience itself. In all reality, it's about reaching and teaching people where they grow naturally. It's about allowing the medium to move into the background, the medium of time and space and rigors of a classroom, and the message of learning to rise to the fore. It didn't take me long until I found professors and instructors and other staff members all over campus who were grappling with the same issues. They had had their own Cheryl experiences. And today, you'll see how we put together a team from departments and divisions all across campus to design a new learning platform, one that focuses on the message, one that's frictionless and students intuitively understand. We'll share that with you today. This project is dedicated to Cheryl. Cheryl was the best teacher I ever had. Hello and welcome. I'm Allison Martin. I'm the Director of Institutional Effectiveness Initiatives at Bossier Parish Community College. Sometimes we call ourselves BIPC, so when you hear BIPC, that just stands for BPCC. Today, my presenters include Dr. Jennifer Lawrence, who is our Director of Grants, among other tasks at the college, Kirk Fontenot, who is Assistant Dean of Liberal Arts, who was an content expert and creator on the project, as well as directing some of our implementation on the project as well. And then Dr. Matt Ghiani, who is at University of Texas as the Director of Research and Policy. But on this project, he served as a third-party evaluator. He created the evaluation, the randomized control trial evaluation, and he'll report on that today. The Open Campus platform reflects many groundbreaking areas in design. First and foremost, though, the design is about a smartphone. It starts with a smartphone, and then it is reverse engineered to resize for desktops, laptops, and game consoles. First and foremost, primarily, it's about a smartphone design, though. That's different from a traditional learning management system. The second is that we've triangulated the findings of neuroscience about memory with cognitive applications for learning. Those two have always been related, but we've added a third, and that's the deep game structure of learning, meaning what qualities are ubiquitous to gaming that are reflected then in cognitive applications for learning. Finally, we'll show you some firsts in increased learning outcomes. There are 3 of those. Increased learning outcomes for students, developmental students, using a smartphone design to learn outside of class.
We have a challenge in Louisiana. 56% of students who enroll in a Louisiana community college are placed in developmental coursework. We know that students who place in developmental courses are less likely to attain a credential. In fact, in Louisiana, less than 10% of students who place in developmental coursework attain a credential within 3 years. This is a problem that BIPC tried to help solve through our Open Campus app. In fact, through a grant from the Department of Education, first in the world, we were able to show that transferring our courses to a mobile app actually improves student outcomes in both math and English. Open Campus allows students access to developmental coursework in math and English. They can use this coursework to prepare for a placement exam or as supplemental instruction while they're in a CTE course or developmental coursework itself. The agility of the mobile app became extremely important during the recent COVID-19 crisis. Because the faculty members had already recorded the videos and had them available through Open Campus, the app allowed these faculty members to move these lectures already recorded and designed straight into their online courses. With only 2 weeks to move from face-to-face to online courses, the availability of the Open Campus material allowed faculty to have a seamless transfer. This also allowed our students to not lose any steam when they were working in their developmental courses and using it as supplemental information for their CTE courses. The agility of the app has been used in many forms and fashions. We've recently added to the app to help ESL students learn free and online on their pace at their time.
First is the smartphone design. The challenge is the traditional learning management system. It hasn't substantively changed in 25 years. It's text-heavy and it's instructor-centric, meaning it's geared towards instructor friendliness, instructor usage, which was important at the beginning. Even quality assurance platforms like Quality Matters focus on training the instructor. In all reality, we need to look at learning management systems with fresh eyes and think about how students operate in the real world, outside of class. So learning management system is text-heavy. Navigation, because it's instructor-centric, navigation can be inconsistent, meaning one instructor may build their course in a different way as another instructor. And many instructors would argue that it's impossible for us to come up with a standard design. But that inconsistency is disoriented. And if retail websites and social media and gaming platforms can come up with some consistent common elements for navigation that make it easy and frictionless to move through those platforms, higher ed can do the same. Think, for example, about the intimidation that a gradebook brings. For us, a gradebook is essential to any course, whether it's online or offline. And we tell our students to go to a gradebook, not thinking about what that means for them. For an under-resourced, poor student who doesn't have income and can't make ends meet, a gradebook is very much like going to their checkbook and seeing the deficits in that checkbook. It reminds people why they don't want to look at their checkbook. It's stressful and it's intimidating. The same with a gradebook. If students aren't doing well, the last place they want to do is go to a gradebook. So how does that work in the retail online gaming world outside of higher education? Smartphone apps often translate those assessment features into things like dashboards, into progress bars, into badging. That way students are seeing what's left to do, what needs to be finished, instead of what have I done wrong. So let's couple that with the latest Pew Research on smartphone ownership. In America, 18 to 40-year-olds in America, 95% of those own and use smartphones almost daily. Even people above that age. My mother is 89 years old and lives in a nursing home, and she uses her smartphone to access Netflix and Amazon Prime. And she's not alone. Many of the old ladies who live there with her do the same thing. Low-income students, though, a smartphone is a lifeline. They use their smartphones as their primary computing device, and they access the internet through free Wi-Fi. So that's low-cost computing, portability, 24/7 access, and free Wi-Fi. That's a bomb of a combination for students to be able to access information. In retail studies, think about first contact. Typically, we don't wait until we get home to access a desktop when we want to go buy something or learn about something. We Google or YouTube it to find out how to do things. For example, my husband and grandson were outside last night with the telescope. They were looking for the moon, but the moon hadn't come up yet. So they wanted to know about when the moon would rise last night. They didn't have to come inside and get to a desktop and Google it. They just clicked on the weather app and moonrise appears, and they know immediately it's 11:29 p.m. last night. Those qualities of online sites, that intuitive navigation, ease of use, on-demand, portability, 24/7 access, dashboards that orient you in space and time so that you don't get lost. That was a big issue with hypertext theory back 20, 30 years ago, was people were getting lost online. But retail, social media, and gaming applications have figured this out. We need to take advantage of that. Students always know their time and space and progress in apps that are outside academia. Let's provide that for students inside academia. Community colleges are charged with bringing educational opportunities to everyone. That's what equity is about. But so often, our confirmation bias is to reinforce the higher ed opportunities, the things that we've seen work in the past. But those aren't working for students like my student Cheryl I told you about. Those students who fall by the wayside because of the intimidation of grade books, the intimidation of having to face academia when they haven't been successful in the past. How can we reframe that, redesign it, so that it doesn't frighten them, so that the medium falls away, and that we can deliver the message of education? So the Open Campus mobile platform is built upon several retail online engagement theories. The first is user acceptance theory. This theory is about prompting flow in a website. It's about frictionless navigation. In my opinion, this is the biggest challenge for the higher ed community when creating online design, because we are not consistent. We are not frictionless. We don't prompt flow. We don't want the medium to be the message here. Back in the 70s, Walter Ong and Marshall McLuhan had said the medium is the message. They're talking about TV, newspapers, radios, that medium then informs the message itself. But where we're at in the 21st century areas, we're having that medium become intuitive or fall away so the message, in essence, can rise to the fore. 10,000 plus hours went into the design of the Open Campus mobile platform to make it feel simplistic, unintimidating, image-based, rather than to make it feel like a traditional classroom experience. Sign up is easy. It is a 24/7 sign up with a 5-step process. It connects with social media so that students don't have to wait to onboard, to log on. They can log on 24/7. And the analytics themselves bear this out. Most students are using Open Campus late at night or early in the morning. We can see that happening. That is so different from the traditional learning management system, which cannot be opened until students get an ID number, until they're registered in a class, and until the class starts. We do students a huge disservice when we make them wait to learn. When in the world outside of academics, it's 24/7 access, on demand. They don't have to wait for anything. Some features that reflect what happens in the real world outside of education are things like the slide bar navigation. We do include a grade book so students can self-assess that way if they want to, but they don't have to. They can look immediately when they open up a course. They see where they are in the course through the slide bar navigation. They can, there's a dashboard and progress bars. The emphasis is not on what the deficit is, what they've missed. It's about what's left. So it's a different way to think about grade books and about assessment. There's also lots of accessibility built in, and it's not only for disabled students, although it's there for them. We also have Spanish translations, and we include closed caption on the videos. More often than not, we see closed caption being used by students who are off to work or who are waiting in line in their cars, and they are pulling up videos. So they can't necessarily have the sound on, but they pull up that closed caption so that they can read and learn and study and not disturb other people. Our platform is made to be user-friendly, and we know that it's successful because out of 10,000 students who have enrolled over the past 3 years, we have had fewer than 5 people contact us to ask us how to navigate the page. Another theory that becomes the foundation for the Open Campus design is the use of social presence theory. And that is the theory that people connect more closely if they think that there's a real person on the other end. And the way we do this is through lecture videos, brief, replayable lecture videos done by our instructors with all their imperfections, but they're authentic. They're not like over-edited talking heads on the news. They're real instructors doing their thing, and that connects with people. So image-heavy how-to videos with the instructor's faces on them, that engenders trust. They're brief videos, so there may be multiple videos per module, but they are brief and replayable. Longer videos will buffer on a smartphone, and we want to avoid that. We know from our analytics that our students stop watching at about 5 minutes. So our videos are about 2 to 5 minutes long. That keeps them easy to replay, and that helps with the buffering situation. Another way this is a groundbreaking project is that we've triangulated the learning coming from neuroscience, where we've had over the past 10 years, many discoveries about how memory works. And this has been borne out in cognitive applications for learning, where groups like Scholarship for Teaching and Learning have made these applications in the classroom and tested them out in randomized control trials. Where we haven't seen the connection is a space where we think we have done the groundwork, and that is to show the overlay between cognitive applications for learning and deep game structure. By deep game structure, I mean that what are those ubiquitous qualities of gaming, online gaming especially, that overlay with the most efficient ways to learn, so that we have a group of game designers who have no connection with the science of learning, who have proven out these strategies. But they're not just game designers. We see these game features in retail and social media every day. We just don't recognize them. So we think that we're working toward a unified theory of learning. We think we're just at the very edge of starting to learn these things, but we think that we've made some headway with our Open Campus platform. By online gaming and social media, these ubiquitous qualities, what we want to know is, what do online game designers know that we don't about engaging and retaining an audience? In essence, about learning itself. In all reality, it's about what students don't know they don't know about learning. And the big part of that is that in gaming, failure is essential in learning to win. But in education, that's counterintuitive. When students fail multiple times over and over again, the instructor will likely tell that student that things aren't working, they need to drop the class, or the student gets that message pretty quickly. So failure is interpreted in two different ways in two different learning environments, inside and outside of academia. Other elements of deep game structure, learning via small dose delivery. So they're brief challenges. Contrast that with testing and how we test our students, assess them. We don't typically do it in brief chunks, but these brief challenges that rely on repetition. So our once and done attitude in academia is counterintuitive to how students learn best, and that's through repetition, where they earn small rewards or suffer small penalties in a game. So leveling and badging then record those small wins or losses. There are levels and counters and timers and badges, and all of these things are on the dashboard. They're always visible. It's sort of an internal GPS for the game. They know where they are in the game. This is opposed to what students see every day in a learning management system where they get lost. There's always these self-evaluation and assessment features, so students can look at their scoreboards, or they see their scores. They can pull up their badges and their achievements. Navigation, once again, is intuitive, frictionless. It doesn't take long for people to understand how or learn a new game. That's important because game designers want to engage them and they want to retain them, and they do that through those same features. More importantly, most of all, failure is not seen as something negative. In fact, if a student wins a game the first time, it won't engage or retain them. They'll think it's easy. They won't be challenged by it. So we need to key in on that idea of failure. The cognitive science of gamification boils down to this idea of building persistence. That's something we haven't done well in academia. We want to build long-term memories or teach students how to build their own long-term memories. We can do that best by chunking content so that students will be interested in repeating what they've done, so it's not too long and intimidating to repeat something. We focus on practice retrieval, practice testing before the big event, so that students learn through the testing process, and failure is a part of that. And spacing and interleaving that practice, so brief chunks, repetition, retrieval practice, spacing and interleaving, spacing and shuffling those brief chunks of information over time is the best way to learn. Once again, we have to take the sting out of failure and have them see it as a success and a learning experience. So this involves teaching students really in a subtle way about cognitive load. Cognitive load and how memory works. I'll take you back probably to your first year in college in an intro psychology class when you remember that you have 3 types of memory. Sensory memory is fleeting. To get something into working memory, you have to pay attention to it. But working memory is finite. Studies have shown the average adult human can hold 5 to 9 items, that's plus or minus 7, items or chunks of items in working memory at any one time before they have to somehow shift that over into long-term memory or lose it. Longer term memory is where you want to put things. Theoretically, it's infinite, right? If you continue to recall, work on practice recall, then you can remember those memories forever. That means that you have to go through the practice retrieval process to move things from working memory into long-term memory. It takes a lot of repetition, and it takes this idea of assessing oneself, testing oneself. Think about how reading flashcards, reading a textbook is different from self-testing. Self-testing is painful, but that's where the learning happens because it's a two-way process. Pulling things back from long-term memory into working memory over the hippocampus until you create a pathway, a neural pathway. That's what testing does. Reading doesn't pull things over the hippocampus because it's a passive experience. We need to get that across to students, that reading, highlighting is not where the most efficient learning happens. The most efficient learning happens when we self-test in brief chunks. So those brief chunks, once again, 5 to 9 items at a time, are groups of items. If we think about how that works, it's cognitive load balancing. So what we want to encourage in our students is to study one area, self-test, 5 to 9 items or chunks of items, then pause for a break, then start a second 5 to 9 items. Even though you might not have mastered the first 5 to 9 items, start that second, work on that for a few minutes, and then pause and go back to the first and shuffle and space that learning experience. This cognitive load balancing is really important because it's about switching brain cells on and off, pausing during rest periods. And sleep is essential to creating long-term memories. That's why cramming doesn't work. If you try to put more than 5 to 9 chunks of items at any one time, something's going to fall away. It won't go into long-term memory. That's the neuroscience of spacing and interleaving over time. So our recipe for success with the Open Campus design is to take the sting out of failure. Failure in test taking is an option, along with keep trying, that persistence. We don't want them to stop when they fail, but go back in there and try again because that will cement those memories. Brief assessments, repeated attempts over time intervals, along with failure in test taking. That is a highly effective way to learn. We have a lot of research that tells us that students who make an unsuccessful attempt at pre-assessing themselves before they look at the study items do better at remembering over the long term than students who read and study information first and then assess themselves. Those remain in working memory and don't usually translate into long-term memory. That idea of failing brings things to mind. That's what my mother did when she was a young woman. I told her about this idea of the importance of failure in test taking to cement memories. She's 89 years old. She can't put a complete sentence together, can't even think in complete thoughts, but this really spurred her attention because she told me about a time in 1948 when she was a new college student in her first year. She was quite a good student, but her strength was math. She was in a world geography class. So she told me at 89, she said, "Oh, I know this works about failure because in my class there was a test, and on that test there was an item and it asked about Palestine, and I missed that item." So here's my mother who can't remember her children's names or put a complete sentence together, who remembered something that she missed on a test and not even in her field, her first year of school, a college, and now that was 70 years back. That's amazing how memory, how failure can impact our memory. We need to reframe that as a learning experience for our students, especially our disadvantaged students, students who come from hard backgrounds. They know what failure is. They don't see it as something to learn from. So Open Campus Mobile really reflects these key cognitive principles applied to learning. That would be chunking content to encourage repetition, spacing and interleaving, that shuffling that brief chunk content over time, and including practice retrieval or prioritizing practice retrieval are self-assessment. Those are key cognitive aspects of learning. Now, we can't go around and teach our students this, but what we can do is tell them that practicing with quizzes can help you learn faster than watching a video. Our students will watch videos until the cows come home. They're used to it. They watch them on social media all the time. So that's not a problem, but that's a passive experience. It's certainly a learning experience. It's there to support them. But the real learning happens when people self-assess, when they practice with brief quizzes and they continue to repeat practice. Also, we tell them choosing a wrong answer can often help you remember more. That one statement flips failure on its end. Choosing a wrong answer can help you remember more. I think we all can learn from that.
One of our goals for this year was to offer fewer developmental courses while still offering students the support that they need. When students are required to take fewer developmental courses, it means that they can graduate on time, but we still want them to be successful. And so one of the things we did this year in the Liberal Arts Division was to eliminate our English 98 course. Now, in the past, English 98 has been a grammar-driven course, and students drill on grammar concepts such as comma splices and run-ons and fragments. Well, since we eliminated that course, we developed instead an English 99 lab to serve as a co-requisite for English 99. So now students will take English 99, which is a writing-focused course, while also taking English 99 lab, which offers them extra support in things like grammar. The asynchronous nature of Open Campus also helped a lot. It gave instructors a greater degree of flexibility that they were really looking for in a lab. For example, students can be watching video lessons on things like fragments, and they can watch the videos over and over. They can work at their own pace. They can take the quiz as an assessment, and they can take the quizzes multiple times. While at the same time, if the instructor wants, they can work one-on-one with students who may have a writing assignment due, or students who are wanting that extra revision help. So the instructor can be accomplishing more than one task at the same time. This really worked well, and the instructors were really pleased. Students improved their grammar skills, while at the same time they got that additional revision support and writing support. So students were able to move through English 99 more successfully in just one semester.
Hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today, even though virtually. My name is Matt Gianni, and I'm the Director of Research and Data Science for the Office of Strategy and Policy, and an Assistant Professor of Practice in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy at UT Austin, the University of Texas. Hook 'em. It's once again a pleasure to be here, and it has been a pleasure for the past over 5 years actually, to have served as the third-party evaluator for Bossier Parish Community College's First in the World grant program, where we evaluated the effect of the mobile apps that you just heard about on various student outcomes. So before I get into the research design and the results of that evaluation, I thought I'd just set the stage and tell you a little bit about how I came to be on this project in the first place. I was actually working on a different project, a research project with Bossier Parish Community College, and they approached me and said, you know, we're thinking about taking this resource we've developed called Open Campus and converting it into a mobile app that can then be used by students for developmental education courses. And I thought two things. First, this is a great idea because we know that one of the most significant barriers for student success in higher education is access to technology, right? And particularly for lower income families and lower income students, it can be a challenge to do schoolwork when so much of it requires access to technology if folks don't have a desktop computer or laptop computer or reliable internet at home. But at the same time, one of the challenges in doing research on the effect of an intervention like a mobile app is that the most common approach for doing so is to just compare the outcomes of students who use the app to students who don't. And the challenge with that type of research is that students who use a supplemental resource like a mobile app might differ systematically from students who choose not to on factors that you can't control for and you don't even observe, right? These students might be more motivated, might be higher achieving, might have higher college aspirations. So you don't really know if it's the effect of the app itself or some other factor that's driving differences in outcomes. So when Allison Martin and her colleagues at BIPSI approached me years ago and told me about this program, I said, well, I think what we should do is randomly assign course sections to either receive the mobile app or not. And we proposed to do that, and that's exactly what we did. So beginning in 2017, we took all of the courses that were developmental math or English, these specific courses we were evaluating, and we took all of the course sections and randomly assigned them to either receive the mobile app or not. And then students who were in the treatment condition got access to the app, while students in the control condition did not. Faculty could choose not to incorporate the apps into their classroom, and students weren't really required to use the apps for the most part. We then followed students over the next couple of years to see what their outcomes were. And this type of randomized controlled trial design is considered to be the gold standard of educational research. And given this research design, we are absolutely thrilled to see some really positive and significant effects of just getting access to the mobile apps on student outcomes. We first did a pilot, or our first pilot was in spring 2017, and we found that students were about 6 percentage points more likely to pass their developmental education course if they had been given access to the mobile apps compared to students who hadn't. But we thought, well, maybe that was a fluke. Maybe it was just something magic happened that semester, but we couldn't really replicate those results. So we did another RCT in the second semester. We randomly assigned course sections once again, and that was in fall 2017. And in that semester, we once again found positive and significant effects of providing students with access to these mobile apps on their performance in developmental education courses, as well as the grades they received in the course. So that semester, we found about a 5.4 percentage point difference in developmental education passing rates between students who received the apps and students who didn't. So now we have 2 semesters in a row where this intervention is proven to be significantly effective on student outcomes. So we then continued to follow students into the future, and lo and behold, we find that just giving access to the apps, right? That's the treatment condition, is just making the apps available to students. Those students were over 3 percentage points more likely to persist from one semester to the next, right? So just the simple act of giving access to a mobile app resulted in students being more likely to stay in college from one semester to the next. Once again, very rare to see positive and significant effects of a fairly non-resource intensive intervention, right, of just simply providing access to an app on students' phones. And we see these really pronounced effects on longer term student outcomes. We continued to follow students through higher education to investigate their college persistence and attainment outcomes. And we find that students who received the apps are about 1 percentage point more likely to have attained an associate's degree about 2 years later compared to students who didn't. That difference was not found to be statistically significant, but a 1 percentage point difference is actually a pretty big deal when the baseline rate for the control group, the percentage of students in the control group who earned an associate's degree within 2 years, was only about 7.8%. So that's over a 10% increase in students' likelihood of earning an associate's degree. Although once again, those differences were not statistically significant, and we'll need to continue following the cohorts over time to see if those differences do become significant as we give students more time to persist in college and to earn degrees. So I'll just say that I was pleasantly surprised in some respects by the significant effects on student outcomes and the magnitude of those effects. Once again, given that this is a fairly easy to implement intervention, right? You just give students access to the apps and they either choose to use them or not. Now, one question you might ask is, well, how many students or what percentage of students actually use the apps? And how effective are the apps for students who actually use them? Once again, this goes back to our challenge that students who use the apps might be systematically from students who don't. So just comparing differences in their outcomes might give you a biased perspective of how effective the treatment actually is. But in this case, because we used a randomized controlled trial design, we can actually use some techniques to try to estimate the effect of the mobile apps for students likely to use them, right? When we do that, we find that students likely to use the apps are about 25 percentage points more likely to have passed their developmental education course compared to students who were unlikely to use the apps, right? Once again, using the kind of randomized controlled trial design. And we find about a 3 percentage point difference in students' attainment outcomes 2 years later, students' likelihood of earning an associate's degree. So for students who are likely to use a resource like a mobile app, giving students access to it may increase their associate's degree attainment rates 3 years later by about 3 percentage points. These were not statistically significant differences. Once again, part of that is just how long we've had to follow students. But these are really, really promising results for the mobile apps thus far. I'll just say one other thing, which is that these results have been so positive and so exciting to so many people in the state of Louisiana that the Louisiana Community and Technical College System has agreed to randomly assign students throughout the LCTCS system to either receive access to these apps or not. So we've put together a consortium of researchers and practitioners, including BIPSI, LCTCS, as well as researchers from the Community College Research Center, from Northwestern University, from Boston College, who are all super excited about the promise of an intervention like this to make a significant difference in student outcomes. So we've recently proposed a study to the Institute of Education Sciences. That proposal is under review right now. And in that proposal, we would take each college in the LCTCS system, and then we'd randomly assign essentially half of students assigned to developmental education. Half of them would get these mobile apps and half of them wouldn't. And then we would be able to estimate the effect of these open campus mobile apps at each college within the LCTCS system, and also just see the overall effect across the system as a whole. And that sample will just allow us to look at things like, is the app more effective for low-income students, for first-generation students, for students of color, generally for populations of students who have historically been marginalized from higher education. So this is really exciting research. Once again, this has been a privilege for me to just have the opportunity to learn about this intervention and to be part of the research that's produced the evidence that we have thus far. So with that, I will turn it back to my BIPSI colleagues and say thank you so much.
Over the course of the Open Campus Project, we've learned many lessons. We've learned through failure how to create a design that's simplistic, that works for developmental level students, but we also know that it works for students beyond our developmental level classroom, target audience. Because it's free, open, and available and scalable, we know that students around our area in high school and middle schools have used Open Campus to remediate in math and in English. High school students use it to prep for the ACT and SAT testing. On the other end of the spectrum, we have graduate level students who've used the Open Campus model to practice for praxis exams for teaching future teachers, and also for the GRE exams as well, for those who want to enter graduate school but need to brush up on math or English skills, so that we know that our model is scalable, can be used anywhere. Bringing education equity is a charge for the community college, and too long we thought that education equity meant to bring students in, to educate them on our 200-year-old factory models of education, which haven't really changed even though we've moved into an online world. The pandemic has this disruption, major disruption in education, is something like we've never seen, but it's the opportune time for us to rethink how we reach and teach students like my student Cheryl, those students who fall by the wayside because they're underprepared or under-resourced, who don't think that they're college material. That's the charge of the community college. That's what we should be doing, going into our communities. The best way to do that is through a 24/7 portable computing device that we have on hand. We have that, and so do low-income students. Too long that we've allowed students to fall by the wayside. We don't want to do that anymore. To be a caring community, to really connect and bring that equity to all, we have to think about how we deliver the message to students, those unconscious biases that we bring to the table that leave so many students by the wayside, being intimidated and feeling left out of the academic process. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have questions, we're all here.